You gonna do the intro again or what? Welcome back, All I Ever Wanted podcast. Back here at the beautiful Central Social Hall Lounge, something or other. It's beautiful back here. Thank you so much for allowing us to use this. Really adds a lot to this podcast that we're doing. What else we got here? We have another guest. Her name is Cassandra. She's a therapist, but I'm going to let her explain what kind.
Well, thank you. Hello. Thanks for having me. I am a registered provisional psychologist. I work in a private practice here in Edmonton called Transcend Psychological, and I've been practicing for 2 years now.
2 years.
Yeah.
Started during COVID. Are we allowed to say that, Producer Mac? We are. Okay, good.
Yes. So I've been practicing for, about 2 years now, and I specialize in sexual health, which is
Sexual health.
what we're here to talk about, I guess.
What's healthy about sex?
What's healthy about sex?
I don't know. You kind of just took me by surprise there. I'm just kidding. I knew what she did, but I'm sure all of you were like, why is she here?
Why is she
Well, she's going to tell us why she's here, because, I mean, it is 2023 still, right? I'm old. My memory goes sometimes.
Yeah.
So anyone who doesn't quite understand why this is an important topic, or thinks that, oh no, it should be quiet and not discussed and we should just hide it away in the background, It's probably best you turn your phone, your TV, however you're watching this, it's probably best you tune out right now, because there's a lot of other people that want to understand why this is an important topic. Please tell us, why is sexual health an important topic?
Well, it's one of the foundational pillars in any relationship for a lot of people. And even when we're talking about sexual health, it's related to, your sexual experiences with a partner, or not with a partner for that matter, your own relationship with yourself as a sexual person. And you're right. I think society very much still puts it in a box of taboo, don't touch. And I kind of love breaking open that box, pulling everything out and seeing what we find.
Just airing all the dirty laundry. Like, what can we dig into? Let's see,
what's
let's
in
see who
here?
we can offend.
All the glitter.
All the glitter. Not really offend. You know what we're getting at. We're just making jokes. It's sometimes you got to get through the uncomfortable first few sentences to realize that pretty much all humans are the same. It's just our comfort level and experience versus lack of knowledge, maybe, and then bridging the two so people can have a better life. And where do you think that starts?
With conversations like this.
Conversations like this.
Yeah.
But they're listening. So what would you tell them? I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this in just like regular speak. If someone had, let's talk about that interpersonal in a committed relationship, when there's that barrier of, I think something needs to change, but I don't know how to discuss it.
Right.
How would you approach that clinically?
Well, you know what? That is actually something that I see quite frequently in my practice, is the bottom line of whatever a couple is presenting with in terms of like their sexual health concerns is communication. Bottom line. They're not talking about sex. And so when they come into my office, very frequently it's, okay, so, I ask a series of questions to kind of get a better understanding of who they are, how they are in terms of their sex life. And what happens, which I find so fascinating, is that a lot of the times they're learning about their partner in sessions with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that is not me shaming anyone for that. Sex is, it's hard to talk about sex because we're not taught how to talk about it. And I think in part because it was something that was kept under wraps and treated as taboo for so long, there's absolutely a bit of that, not stigma, but hesitancy to bring it up. So when you're even in your initial dating stages, you don't talk about it, but you do it, and then it kind of spirals because, well, now we haven't talked about it, but we're doing it, and then you kind of just have this uncontrollable ball roll down a hill until you end up in my office wondering why you're not satisfied in your sexual relationship.
I guess if it just progresses one way, you both think that that's what you wanted, when really no one ever set boundaries, or maybe what is okay, what isn't okay. Are we even ready for it yet?
Yeah.
And that way, because that comfort level, I know, is some people it takes longer. Others, they can dive right in. You know, you hear about relationships that were just hot and heavy at the beginning and then died off. Then you have some that waited forever, and those became really good relationships. So I think, yeah, obviously the communication right off the bat, as uncomfortable as it may be, because I know, like, as a guy, that's not something you'd bring up to a girl right on, like, the first few dates.
Why not?
But I think because it almost sets the tone, like, we're here for that. And in this day and age, you know, men have to be much more careful in how forward we are. We kind of have to test the waters, just so we're making sure that, best way to put it, are we actually dating for that reason, or are we sitting down as friends going forward, kind of thing? So I know a lot of guys, when they've talked to me about that kind of stuff, it is more so, how do you break that line between we're casual friends, we're casual hookups, or we're aiming for because the moment you take the romance out of it and try and make it about words, it's like it cools the situation right off.
Right. Well, and, you know, I think having that explicitly stated right from the get-go, where it's like, what are we doing here? Because most of the time, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. And for a lot of couples, getting on the same page, or even, casual hookups, whoever it is, getting on the same page is much more about how you're saying what you're saying, rather than the actual words that are coming out of your mouth. You know, and I think approaching it as a male, you know, there is a lot of maybe societal narrative that tells you that you can't approach it, but I think that's because, again, we're not taught how to talk about sex in a way that makes it safe and accessible and enjoyable for everyone.
I guess, yeah. So it's a very, especially in hookup culture nowadays, it's very, what am I getting out of it right now? And who cares about tomorrow?
Yeah.
I don't even need to know their name, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that confuses a lot of people, because if one side of it isn't into that, one side is, the person who just wants to make it about the hookup is just going to go through the evening, don't care about tomorrow. The other one may be uncomfortable participating at that level, but thinking, well, they'll stick around if we do this now, and then it kind of just turns into a bad scenario.
Totally.
So what do you think, I have a bunch of different ways to come off from that, but where do you think that scenario starts when you're having that first sit down? Let's assume you didn't hook up on some dating app where it's kind of understood that our names are irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I say that conversation needs to start with yourself. So a lot of people they might assume that they want something or that they don't want something, but no one actually ever talks to themselves about who they are as sexual people. And I don't want to say no one. I'm sure some people do. But what I teach my clients to do is figure out their sexual scripts. So a sexual script is your thoughts, beliefs, opinions, expectations, kinks, not kinks, around yourself as a sexual person. So and the example that I like to give is the one that's kind of dictated by our society, which is sex is a experience between two individuals, let's just say male, female, who are engaging in penetrative sex for the purposes of achieving orgasm. That could be a sexual script, right? Okay. And that's the one that is pushed most often by our society through media, through movies, through social media, through everything, right? And if that is a sexual script that you believe for yourself, then things like maybe your own, I don't know, not opinions, but what you want out of sex or what you don't want out of sex, you know, that's not really included in that because it's so generic. It's so, it's not maybe even your sexual script. It's just the one you've adopted because society's told you to. So kind of have my clients start there and start exploring their own sexual script and what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? Who do you want to be as a sexual person? Who do you want to be for your partner? Who do you want to be for yourself? is yourself even included in that? Like,
do you find that when you have those discussions that partners who've been together for a while almost come to the realization that they actually wanted the same thing, but neither of them wanted to approach it first?
all the time.
It is, eh?
All the time.
Okay,
And you know what? It's like a beautiful thing, though, when you find out that you're maybe actually on the same page and you just haven't had the language or the tools or the skill maybe to talk about it with your partner in a way that's healthy or adaptive for both of you. So yeah, when they kind of come to the realization that they want the same thing, I'm like, oh,
there you go.
So
Problem
good.
solved. Yeah. Now you can just take the therapist or the bill out of the equation and just talk about it at home.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
exactly.
So, that's crazy. Okay, well, one of the things that I'm just going to throw it out there, and I know a lot of people are going to probably get triggered by this just based on the demographic climate of North America and what's been happening for the last few years. A lot of, because again, I don't know a female's perspective. I can only go by what I'm told by females, as well as, and we're not picking on genders here. We're not, even if you don't identify, we're not playing that game right now. We're talking about just what one partner may want from another. It does not matter which non-identified gender or agender or binary, none of that stuff. We're just talking about when one person wants something, they want to do something, and we're going to talk about it from the male-female perspective, because that's typically what my male friends will ask me.
Okay.
Sorry that it took so convoluted, but everybody's so sensitive about how you approach the initial portion of a conversation. I hear from guys, it's so difficult to engage with women because I want this, but if it's the first scenario or the first step, whether it's asking someone out, that first time having sex, where's that line with what's too aggressive, we'll call it? Because at the same time, I've heard women say, why aren't there any men anymore? Just ask me out, just throw me against a wall, that kind of thing. But then guys are absolutely scared shitless about doing something like that because we're shot down in public, because that's the movement, is put men in their place. And I know I don't want to say it like that, like feminist approach, but just guys are just scared to approach women at this point because it's so terrible. And then when you get past that point, how would you explain to men to be aggressive, to be assertive? Because that's viewed very differently by the recipient.
I say this a lot, and I'll probably say it a couple more times as well. It's very situation specific and partner dependent. So what are your definitions of aggressive? What are your definitions of assertive, right? And some dynamics, some couple dynamics might have very different understandings of what that looks like. I think it's also important to acknowledge that if you're with a partner who is not, maybe let's say, naturally that way, chances of them opening up like a flower and being that way are maybe not so likely. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's not what I'm saying at all, but not so likely. If you want that like aggressive, assertive, like typical male partner, then that is the type of person that you should be looking for in dating. I frequently have conversations with couples about how we will initially really love something about someone, and that very thing that we love also contributes to maybe parts of that partner that we end up resenting or not liking or even being jealous of.
Yeah.
So I'll give an example of maybe you really love initially that your partner is so spontaneous.
Yeah.
Right? You love that they just kind of show up and surprise you, and they're just, kind of nomadic and do all these fun things, and you're so attracted to that. But now it's been 5 years, and that characteristic of them hasn't changed. And now you're starting to resent it because they're maybe late all the time, or they're quick to whim, and you might not be that kind of person. And so it's interesting how the things that we might initially love about a partner, or that we think we want in a partner, can change over time because we're maybe not again, having those conversations with ourselves. What is it that I want? What is it that I don't want? And I'm not just talking about the next 5 minutes. I'm talking about the next 10 years of my life. I'm trying to...
I could see that, yeah, because everything is fresh and exciting and new when you start a relationship, and that heightens the experience. But then when the longer you're in a relationship, what's keeping... Not that it dies out, but you're always looking for the next, not level up in a relationship, but kind of more commitment, more what are we doing as opposed to how are we individually working as a group.
Right.
It's what are we doing, we, as opposed to you and I having fun. So I could see that being a problem. Then I guess, the next question I really got to lead into, because as you know, and I'm sure throughout your history of helping people, I guess, listening to their problems, diagnosing it, like is diagnosing the right word, or thinking of a treatment plan? Like how do you classify what if someone wants to walk up to you and say, we're having issues, what do you do after you talk to them? Is there a treatment plan? Is there what do you call the process of getting couples or even an individual, because this doesn't have to be just couples and a therapist. This can be an individual who may be not experiencing life the way they would like to, and they don't know how to break out of it. So what do you call what you do when you sit down with someone?
Well, so first and foremost, I fundamentally believe that my clients are the experts in their own lives, in so much as if they come to me saying that something is causing them issue or something is a problem, that's what we lean into, right? It is not my place to tell my clients that a problem is not a problem for them, or that that's not something that they should be concerned with. It's not my place to be dismissive in that regard, nor do I think it's any psychologist's place to be dismissive like that. I fundamentally believe that clients do have expertise in their own lives, and so if an individual or a couple comes to me and they say, this is our problem, I'm like, cool, let's figure that out, right? And through that, my role does involve, psychoeducation. And so, for example, one of the number one, I think, problems that I have presented to me is desire discrepancies. So either one partner has no desire, or one partner has a lot of desire, or it's just a mixed match of desire. I'll see that in individuals, I'll see that in couples, but that's one of the number one issues that is presented in my office. And it's not my place to be like, that's not an issue, but it is my place to provide psychoeducation, to provide tools I kind of conceptualize it like an iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg is the client's presenting problem. That is what they are saying is the issue for them.
What they think, the superficial issue, yeah.
Right. And then below that is, so maybe absolutely desire discrepancy is there, but now we're discovering that there's those communication issues, right? So they're not talking about sex. Okay, so now we actually need to target figuring out how to talk about sex before we can go back to desire discrepancies. Yeah. So there is...
What can cause one being high and one being low? How did you get there? Not just what the result, not just what you don't like, but what were the steps leading up to that huge discrepancy?
Right.
Yeah,
so
I get that,
so a large part of my role is, okay, so we have the tip of our iceberg, what's below it? Let's figure it out.
So what do you call that? Is that a treatment process? Is that a discovery process? What do you...
Initially it's an assessment, but assessment is always ongoing.
Yes.
So I'm constantly reevaluating, reassessing where my clients are at, where they think they're at, where we need to go. It's very collaborative in that regard. And that's just how I approach it. Not every psychologist treats in that way, but I teach in a very collaborative, treat in a very collaborative manner.
Okay. So I guess the direction that I'd like to go now, from a male standpoint, because we're clueless. Let's be completely honest. We, for the most part, I'm sure women wished we knew a lot more than we assume that we do. If there was one thing from a female perspective that you would like, if you we're not looking for shock value here. If you were to look into that camera, but it's that camera for you, what could you tell the male audience who's interested in females one thing doesn't matter how long it takes to say it, what would you say would be the best thing to say about trying to understand how a woman approaches sex? And I know you can't just put it all, lump it into one pile. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that you would say men need to know about women's mindset when it comes to sex.
Okay. When it comes to...
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
we are not scripted. We do not script this stuff. We don't let the guests know what we're going to talk about because we want honest answers.
Well, I'll speak to it from, not just like a female perspective, but as a professional. I think what I see most often is just fucking ask. Like, it seems so simple, but just ask your partner what they want.
Okay. And that doesn't, to us, I think we look at that and it says, oh, if we have to talk about it, she's going to think that it's not spontaneous or this, and it's going to ruin the mood.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because there's a lot of misconception around desire. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that everyone is just walking around spontaneously horny. So everyone is just like, boom, horny in a second, right? And the reality is that that's fundamentally not true. And a researcher by the name of Emily Nagoski really kind of hits this home. And so a lot of the language I'm about to use is attributed to her and her research. So there's different types of desire. We have spontaneous and we have responsive. Okay. Spontaneous desire is that. It's like a flip of a switch that you are just all of a sudden kind of feeling that maybe arousal response in your body, which is triggering a desire response, which is triggering you wanting to have sex. Responsive desire happens within context. So most people actually fall into a responsive desire category, which is, I am not walking around horny. I am not wanting to have sex all the time. But if you approach me and you do things that I like, I might get into it.
That could be anything from a scent, a conversation, situational. So it's completely situational at that point.
Right.
It brought it on. Like, if you weren't looking for it, it just kind of, oh, now I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm listening with different parts of my body.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
And I explained it to clients like, what I find interesting is that we have arousal and we have desire. So arousal is your physiological response, right? That's heart rate increasing, that's getting an erection, that's cervix moving up and out of the way for penetration, like all of these, lubrication, all that fun stuff. Desire is your psychological experience of horniness, or your I want to. Is that the
clinical word?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It is, absolutely. Look it up. So we often...
From the Latin word to horn.
Yes. So we think that desire is supposed to precede arousal. We think we're supposed to want it before we experience it. But if you look at any other kind of physiological experience, most of the time we feel it in our bodies before we perceive it or interpret it through our brains. And yet with sex, for some reason, we think our brain has to be the first one to tell us that we want something. And the example I use is, you touch a hot stove.
Wow, that's exactly where my mind was. I was trying to figure out how to turn that into this.
Yeah, so you touch a hot stove, your body feels the pain first before your brain has the opportunity to be like, ow, that hurt. Yeah. Right? And arousal and desire can work in the same way. And for a lot of people, they do. For a lot of people, you need to feel arousal first before you experience desire.
This might be a difference in genders, because I'm sure every woman would agree that most guys aren't using their brain anyways.
Well, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the research on that one. I might have to look into it. But
okay. Yeah.
So then
there's no research done on male brain activity. It's like one of those ECGs that they hook you up to in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Occasionally you get a blip, and that was by accident. That was just machine malfunction.
Oh my gosh. So we have these different types of desire. Now, what the research has shown is that there are differences between males and females. So females tend to be much more responsive desire-based, and males tend to be more spontaneous desire-based. And the mechanisms, I think, at work with that are very much linked to, and I'll use an example of like an automatic versus a manual transmission. So an automatic transmission, You put your foot on the gas, the car goes. Take your foot off the gas, the car still goes. You have to actively pump the brakes to get the car to stop.
Okay.
Right? That's a male. Okay.
See, and I would have thought the other way, but all right, we'll leave it at that.
That's a male. And the reason that's male is because it's a pretty self-contained feedback loop in so much as nothing is interrupting it. Right? So there's no, I don't know, oil leak somewhere. There's nothing happening. It's self-contained. It's working.
Okay.
Women tend to be more of a manual transmission. So stop smiling like that. Stop. Tend to be more.
We're about to get canceled. I can feel that in my brain. All right, so you need to be forced into gear. All right.
No.
Grind a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
But not in the way you just said it. So, first, second gear, yeah, maybe a little bit of grinding, maybe a little bit of not really sure if we want this yet.
Okay.
Third, fourth gear, we're getting into it. We're getting excited. You know, we're feeling all that arousal. We're feeling that desire. Fifth, sixth, amazing, wonderful, loving it. But at any point in time, you can throw a manual car into neutral or park, and your experience is over. Get off the ride.
There we go.
So, women are much more psychologically, narratively, thematically based in their experience of desire. That is a lot harder to maintain and contain in a feedback loop from disruption and interruption from other spaces. So even as, and I'll use a classic example that I hear where it's like, you know, you're trying to have this sexual experience with a partner and you're sitting there and you're like, fuck, did I do the laundry? Oh my God, I don't know if I turned my hair straightener off. Okay, we got to get the kids to school by this time tomorrow. Like, you're still thinking about all these other things. And that is disrupting your narrative. That is the very thing that's supposed to, for you, feel good, feel arousing, feel exciting, and get you into the mood.
See, and it's amazing how that can snowball, because if a guy notices that a woman maybe loses rhythm or gets turned off, he'll automatically go to, oh shit, I'm doing it wrong. And then he gets into his head, because we don't think about whether we plugged the straightener in or left the stove on. That's later. But the moment he doesn't feel like the man, boom. Now there's a physiological problem, not an emotional one, and it's trying to shoot pool with a rope. So
totally, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
You become very aware, right? Very aware. And, you know, partners engaging in those experiences are sensitive to whatever's happening for their other partner, hopefully. So you want to, you're paying attention. You want your partner to be enjoying the experience. And if it feels like they're not, that obviously doesn't feel very good, which can then lead to what I call like kinks or damages or disruptions to your sexual script. Because if your sexual script is we have penetrative sex that leads to orgasm, we have a partner who's maybe really stressed out, has a lot on their plate, has a lot going on, and is constantly distracted, and you pick up on that, that's disrupting your sexual script. That's going to bring shame, that's going to bring embarrassment, that's going to bring anxiety.
Too much ego goes into that, and we start thinking of it as more of what did we do wrong, as opposed to, like, individually, what did we do wrong, as opposed to how do we as a partnership make this better.
Yeah.
But again, the lack of communication lets our heads go in whichever direction we take it, as opposed to, you know, a group making a conscious effort to figure out if there actually was a problem or if it was just a distraction.
Yeah.
Because the moment we turn it into, and humans love to turn things negative. Why always me? What did I do wrong? Well, it can't be my fault, because you make it all about yourself, whether it's a positive or a negative way of doing that. And then then it just keeps snowballing. And the next time you try, all you remember is the last negative attempt.
Yeah.
These aren't rocket launches. You don't worry about what happened in the past. You start a new one and just focus on that. And I think a lot of people are too worried about the past, whether it's either past partners, maybe a bad response with the current partner last time, and then they drag it out too far, and it really then becomes detrimental to the relationship.
Right. And I think too, you know, just in that same line of thought, if a partner is feeling that, you know, maybe stress in work, or they have other things on their plate, they've got other things going on for them, a lot of the times we're actually not attributing that to our ability to experience sex in a meaningful way. Like, a lot of the times we keep it so separate that we don't realize the stress that we're experiencing at work might actually have an impact on why we're not able to get in the mood for sex or enjoy sex in ways that we previously maybe were capable of prior to experiencing all of that stress.
So we'll go back to clients coming into your office. Without saying they're not communicating, just so people can relate, because maybe they're feeling this at home, what would you say are the top two, we'll call them diagnoses, but the top two issues that you find cause that division in a relationship on the sexual side? Maybe just the top one, but if you can think of two major ones, because again, I want this to be relatable to everyone. I don't want people to go and say, oh, well, they're just talking generic, that my situation's different. You know how everybody always thinks I've got the worst scenario. So they can relate. What would you say are at least one, but maybe go into two really common detractors, or I don't know the word, whatever, something that puts a stop to the intimacy in a relationship?
Biggest one is expectation.
Okay.
So one person's expectation of the other specifically. More than not, especially if we're going back to desire discrepancies as like our tip of the iceberg, one partner's expectation of the other partner is usually what leads to further breakdown in the sexual relationship. So if one partner is expecting to have sex every other day and the other partner just maybe isn't in a space to provide that, doesn't want that, one partner is good with once a month. Well, now we have a big gap between what one partner wants and what another partner wants. And if that is being communicated through expectation, so, well, you should just want it. Well, why is it such a big deal? Why do I not have to have sex as much? Because you want it less, right? Like I hear stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the reality is that expectation is killing it further from, or getting you further from what you want.
Okay.
Because the more your partner feels your expectation, the more pressure they're going to internalize and the more they're going to want to run away. Because our bodies are programmed to keep us away from negative experiences, right? Touch a hot stove once, you're hopefully going to remember to not touch it again, right? At least on purpose.
Negative feedback loop.
Yeah. And if now one partner is feeling pressure, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like they're not maybe even safe in their sexual experience, and you're sitting there being like, well, too bad, I want more. Good fucking luck.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I frequently tell my clients, expectation does not belong in the bedroom. Expectation does not belong in your sexual experiences. You are allowed to have wants. You are allowed to have desires. You are allowed to have certain things that you enjoy sexually, and those can all be different. But at the end of the day, we are running at the pace of the slowest runner, because you cannot expect someone to run a marathon if they have never even completed a kilometer. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, because you're going to come in with different experience levels, knowledge levels, or just interest levels. So.
Totally.
Well, you know what? I'm going to leave that one there because I want to, now you're talking about expectations. This is one that you see come up a lot across media, you know, whether it's because of religion-based or ideology-based. Do you feel that porn hurts or does not hurt a relationship sexually?
Depends.
Okay.
I live in the gray area, by the way, so I'll never give you a black and white answer. It depends, because one, we have to understand, first of all, what is our definition, our working definition of porn, because for some people that is very broad, for some people it's very specific. Okay, so we have to figure that out. The other thing we have to figure out is porn involved in your sexual script? So are you the type of person that includes porn in your
Wait, are we even allowed to say that, or do we have to say corn? I've actually seen, this is how sensitive of a topic this is. There's a lot of videos.
Just voice over.
Yeah, just put a big corn stalk or something. Bigger the better, I'm told.
So we have to understand if it's a part of your sexual script or not. And for some people, for whatever reasons they have, it's not. And for others, they do. And I think you can have adaptive and healthy experiences with porn, but unfortunately for most people, that's not the case. Most people are exposed to porn at a very young age, and it can oftentimes lead to misconstrued expectations of yourself and your partner as to how your sexual experiences are going to go. And again, if porn is then leading to misconstrued expectation, that doesn't belong in a partnership. Mm-hmm. What I will say is porn can be instructive, and porn can be a great shared experience. Porn can be useful in certain ways, absolutely. But again, it is very dependent on that couple and their own views of porn and how they would like or not like that incorporated into their sexual experiences.
Okay. Because for me, being a human with a brain, being turned on by something and also understanding that that's not what people look like in real life. Like this is where I think I have the issue with, like, I don't care whether people do or don't partake in viewing of it. My issue is the demonization of something based on the thought that humans are too stupid to understand what. Do I watch Hollywood movies, like a Marvel movie, and think that everyone looks like the Incredible Hulk? No, because I have a brain. Yeah, exactly. Am I going to feel inadequate in the world because Hulk is 16 feet tall and 600 pounds of pure muscle? I don't look like that. There's something wrong with me. No, clearly you walk around and you know people don't look like on TV. These are also actors and actresses. Mm-hmm. So where do you think this hatred towards it comes from? Like, I can understand there's certain acts done within the adult industry that you should never force on a partner. Mm-hmm. Like, because there's a lot of, like, I'm not talking about the nastier side of it. Mm-hmm. That I really don't understand people's certain fetishes and kinks, but I mean just a human body, even if it's maybe even a little bit of an aggressive sexual encounter and that kind of thing, within reason, I don't understand how just people being nude and intimate is something that destroys society. Well, where do you think that line is? Like, I'm just, because it seems to me, you talk about you can play in that gray area. Mm-hmm. There's this huge, it's destroying society. Now, how could it possibly destroy society? Mm-hmm. And I'm just playing devil's advocate. Yeah. I'm not promoting it. Like, why would I say go watch it? If you like it, you like it. You don't, you don't. This is a conversational topic. So again, we can breach we can't talk about this. No, we absolutely can talk about it because it exists. Mm-hmm.
Well, so I mean, I definitely, on board with the demonization of human trafficking and human sex trafficking all of the, lack of consent and horribleness that does go on behind the scenes with porn. That is absolutely a part of the porn industry, unfortunately, and it's disgusting and it's horrible, and that is a whole other separate issue that deserves time and attention and is
we're not talking about the stuff where someone should be behind bars or worse, because I have my opinions there. I'm just strictly talking about it in its natural form, not perversions, not
Well,
anything,
I do think that it is definitely just how porn is presented, because again, most of the time people are experiencing porn for the first time at very young, susceptible ages. Sometimes people's first experiences, masturbating are to a porn video, and it's incredibly accessible now, right? Yeah. So.
Oh, Mom, what are you doing online?
Oh, God. So I think where that issue lies is sometimes what that can create is positive feedback loops. So it's not so much that the porn in and of itself is creating an issue, but it's that person's relationship with the porn. So if you are masturbating frequently to a specific type of porn, that's going to essentially pigeonhole you into experiencing arousal and desire for a specific type of something, right? What that can then lead to is, again, those expectations put on your partner that they're supposed to be that way because that's what turns you on, or that is what has turned you on historically for the last 10 years that you've been masturbating to it. So when your partner doesn't deliver, that's when we have things like, issues within the dynamic, because it's like, well, I'm not turned on by you. Well, why am I not turned on by you? Why can't you just be like this porn video that I saw that one time?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So again, I don't think it's necessarily the porn in and of itself. It's much more the person's relationship to that porn and how that's showing up in their sexual experiences.
So they're programming themselves to only respond to scenarios that are, I'm not going to call it imaginary, but predetermined, and that's the only path they're going to go down from there on.
They can fall into that for sure.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot more sense. See, when someone explains it, and I hope this is helping anyone watching, I will, again, play devil's advocate just to start the conversation, not for shock value, because a lot of people do want to learn more. They want to hear both sides. So in order to start a conversation, maybe an uncomfortable question has to be asked. And I think that's a very good explanation of it. It's not so much, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, if they see it in porn, that's what they're going to transition into the bedroom, and they're going to be too rough with their partner or expect their partner to do this. We don't have to turn it into the raging hellfire. It can literally be what she said. You're pre-programming yourself to not be able to be intimate later on with a partner. That is actually something that probably takes up 90% of the problems that, say, adult entertainment creates. It's not really well, I know I don't look like him. You know how I know that? Because the 200 people I met today don't look like him or her, or we can tell a surgeon's hit that body. We are not stupid enough to not know what does and doesn't exist in the world, or in very low numbers. But hearing what you said there, being you're conditioning yourself to then not be able to be relatable later in life on the intimate side. See, this is how you progress. You have an intelligent conversation. You don't just get mad at the beginning or start waving a Bible or one of those types of things. You have to have the conversation intellectually as an adult and then get to a resolution that people can understand, even if you don't agree. Understanding and agreeing are not always the same thing. We can respectfully agree to disagree. But
And
at least we had the dialogue.
It's all up to that couple, because, bottom line is, if you do not see it as a problem, it is not a problem. If you are happy with whatever your sexual experience currently looks like, power to you. Great.
Yeah, don't
amazing.
look for a problem.
That's wonderful. And it's only a problem if it's a problem for you and your partner, right? Of course, if it's just a problem for you, but it's not a problem for your partner, well, we're going to have to talk about that and figure that out.
That is a problem.
That is a problem.
Yes.
But, if you're happy and if you're loving it and if your dynamic works for you, then that's amazing. And you don't have to feel, shame or embarrassment around that, because you like what you like and there's nothing wrong with that.
Very cool. Nice touch on that.
Obviously, I can speak to the female perspective a lot more fluently because I am a female and have experienced it, but there is very much a social script that is men are supposed to be macho, performative 100% of the time, be able to, fuck for hours, and they never have an issue. They can never not perform, and it's so discouraging, because the second you do experience something like that's longer response time or is away from that sexual narrative, it is so damaging. And then you're also not taught to talk about your emotions for the most part.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So then coming to someone like me, for help.
Safe space.
Very safe space, always. But that can be really hard, because you were never... Nice. You were never taught to talk about those things, and you were never taught that sometimes mechanics might not be working, but psychologically you're there, you're ready to go, and vice versa. Whereas women are taught that. Women are taught that we will probably not orgasm every single time, that our sexual experience is in service to another person's sexual experience. The narratives that we are fed about how we're supposed to be sexually are so different. And I think that also plays a role in just some of those discrepancies with couples too. Yeah,
friction in a relationship just based on what you think your role in that. We put too much, what's the word? Too much pre-scripted knowledge or going back to the expectations. It's like someone's already written the book, and if we don't follow it to the T, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be scripted. That's when it gets boring. You know, so I can completely see how one or both partners, or maybe there's 4 or 5 of you there at once, but it just doesn't work if you feel too stressed out trying to go by the book.
Yeah.
So and yeah, I know all guys, but most guys won't admit it, but you know, you'll hear, oh yeah, so and so's last boyfriend, go for hours, or all guys should be able to do that, and then we were just like, hours?
Yeah.
I've got a coffee break right now. We can probably do it 3 times in there. Yeah. So the stresses, I think, go to both sides, and I think the key is not to say that either sides are worse. It's to acknowledge that both parties can have issues. They can be completely different. It's only continually an issue if you don't address it, communicate, or find that help, I guess.
Right.
Because if you want it to be better, you can't expect the other person to read minds as well.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too, I think, is just that there is a lot of assumption around what your partner might know about you or not know about you, or shouldn't you just know that I feel this way about this, and assuming makes an ass out of you and me. Like, it's such a cliche, but it's so true. You know, the more you assume about your partner, the less you actually probably know about them.
Cool.
So just ask.
Just ask.
Just fucking
communication.
ask.
You knew that's what this whole segment was going to come down to, is just more communication. If you have, because there's no point having a question if you don't ask it. You're never going to learn if you don't just start the dialogue.
Yeah.
It could be a silly one. Because of course you're gonna feel uncomfortable. But what's worse, feeling uncomfortable for 5 minutes, or having months or years of a relationship where you never just felt uncomfortable for the first 5 minutes? You just start feeling resentment for the rest of the relationship. So. And
there's so many cool resources out there too now. Like, if you don't know how to start the conversation, you can find cool conversation decks of card decks where it's you're just asking each other questions. Maybe that sparks a conversation for you. Or, you can just Google partnered sex questions. I'm sure there's so many resources out there that you can use. Do they have any
games that can be played, card games?
Yeah,
there's
some card games. Absolutely there is. And so it's, if you don't know how to start it, even just saying that, hey babe, this is going to be uncomfortable. I don't really know how to start it, but I want us to talk about our sex life.
And I bet you the other person will even appreciate it. Doesn't matter the gender. I think just starting the conversation, because they probably also have something they want to talk about. But if you take the initiative, and again, the initiative does not fall on either gender or whether you're gendered or not, the person who starts it will actually probably be respected more so by the other person for saying, okay, let's just talk. Let's figure out what needs to be talked about, and then we'll talk about it, as opposed to just starting a conversation about it. This is how you get away from a conflicting confrontation. You can start it by saying, let's see what we want to talk about. And once the floodgate opens, all the rest of it can as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I will tell people too, if you are going to start that conversation, best to not do it in a rush. So let's not start this conversation at 8:30 in the morning when we're both off to our jobs.
To work, yeah.
Yeah. Best to do it in a neutral territory. So it's actually, this might sound so weird, but it's actually easier to do that in a space that isn't your home. Even though home is our comfort space, go to a coffee shop, go to a restaurant, talk there. And the reason being, it is uncomfortable. It can be sometimes anxiety provoking.
Don't attribute that to your home base.
You don't want that to be attributed to where you're having sex the most. If you're having sex the most at restaurants, power to you. So maybe just don't go to that one.
Not condoning public sexuality. Okay, we don't want to get any feedback on that one.
I shouldn't say that.
But congratulations.
No, but it's, your home base. Don't have this conversation sitting on the bed if that is where you have sex the most. That's not where this conversation should be had. Neutral territory. And
Switzerland.
Go to Switzerland, talk about sex, come back. And then the other really interesting piece too is, 2 things. So one, carrying a tone of curiosity rather than judgment, and openness rather than kind of leading with your own narrative. So it's not just about you, it is about your partner as well. Stay curious about what they're saying. ask 10 questions, you know? And if they say something and immediately maybe you do have a reaction of like, whoa, just ask more, get clarity, talk about it. And then I find, and this might just be my own personal thing, but having those conversations is easier when you're sitting next to each other rather than across from each other. Across from each other can be interpreted as very confrontational, very job interviewee, very podcasty. Whereas if you're sitting next to each other, you're sitting as partners. You're on the same side, literally and figuratively.
Interesting. And I'd like to just build off of that one. You shouldn't ever be offended by what your partner says. If anything, you should be aroused. When you get the chance to actually hear what they want, it's making your job much easier. So guys, this is your chance to read their mind by just listening to what they're saying. Wow, what a revolution. She's literally going to do your job for you. Because when you know what it is she wants, and forget about trying to jump right to the sexual side of things, maybe you're going to also find out what's stopping before it even starts. What pumped the brakes before you even got to why aren't you aroused? How about what makes it so you can't be?
Totally. And there's definitely certain things, like some people are like, you know what, I'm tired after work. And I don't want to have sex after work. Fair, valid. You're not in the right headspace. That's cool. And I think a lot of people too, especially busy people, are opposed to the idea of scheduling sex. And
that one always did seem weird to me. For some reason, I just thought that would that would put too much pressure on it.
It does if you are like, okay, Sunday morning, 6 a.m., we're having sex. I don't know anyone. I wouldn't want to do that on Sunday morning, but whatever.
In church. Wow.
Yeah. But the idea of, hey, Friday nights are our sexy time. And that might just involve playing a card game to learn more about each other. That might involve massages. That might involve bubble bath together. That might involve, it's all about cultivating a desire to desire rather than forcing yourselves to have sex at a given time.
And maybe you don't even do it with the end result of the expectation of it.
Exactly.
It's intimate time.
Exactly.
Before, yeah.
I'm all for scheduling intimacy. I'm all for scheduling opportunity for yourselves if you're busy people, because the reality is you do that with everything else in your life. And if you don't do it with that, when is it going to happen? Everyone says, oh yeah, we'll make time. But the reality is that most people don't make time for themselves as partners. And what I find the most interesting, so you talk about like honeymoon phase. So those early initial couple months where you're dating someone, what are you actually doing? Why is it that you want to have sex with them all the time? Well, you're spending hours preparing for your dates. You're planning, you're prepping, you're showering, you're putting on nice clothes, you're peacocking, right? Then you're thinking about it because you're excited. And so, yeah, you want to have sex with them then. When you move in together or when you spend more time in a relationship, that novelty wears off. And it's your responsibility to bring that novelty back in, to bring that back into your experience and date your partner again, if you want to cultivate that same kind of feeling.
So you're responsible for your happiness. Whoa, there's a big word there, responsible. Not a lot of people like that. It's so much easier to blame somebody else for not being on our wavelength instead of understanding that you're both responsible for your betterment in life. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, this goes back to everything we talk about on this channel, whether it's finances, health. Now we're talking about sex in a relationship. You're responsible.
Yep.
I was actually going to end it, but I want to kick it quickly to another side tangent. Health. Like, forget about adding the sexual to the word health. How many times do you think it's just people's physical health that's deteriorated that lowers their desire for their partner? And I'm not saying we should all be superficial, everybody should be beautiful all the time, but is that ever a diagnosis and a treatment program to say, look, maybe you two should go be active together? Because a lot of sedate lives happen. Kids can come into the equation,
right?
Mortgages come into the equation,
yep.
And you're so focused on living that you don't focus on being healthy while living.
Well, kind of like I mentioned earlier, how the other facets of your life contribute to your experience as a sexual person. So if you're really stressed out and your body is pumping cortisol through its system and you are constantly in a fight or flight response, you don't have the space physically to relax, to be engaged with desire, because you're constantly, or arousal, because you're constantly in a state of panic. Your body is, right? And of course, like your general health plays a role in your sexual health. They're definitely intertwined. And so if you've got a lot going on for yourself elsewhere, that's absolutely something that I talk about with my clients, because it does impact, and I mean, as you know, I treat sexual pain as well, sexual pain and dysfunction, and those are not closed feedback loops. Those are integrated and open feedback loops that are susceptible to numerous other health conditions and experiences in a person's life. Mm-hmm. So your sex life is not in isolation.
Okay. Well, that is one hell of a load of information to take in all at once. So I think this is going to be something where we're actually going to probably have to have a second episode in the future, because there people will take all this in and they're probably going to have a whole bunch of questions that we're not going to be, like, on our end. I don't think we're going to be certified to deal with the answers kind of thing. So I would like to have you on again, maybe in the future when you're not as busy.
Sure.
We'll definitely put all of Cassandra's information either down here or in the description, so you can reach out to her if you have any questions at all. Like,
totally.
Typically, how far in advance do they have to book to get in to see you now?
Depends on what their preference for time is. Currently, I'm booking a couple weeks in advance. So it kind of just depends on what their availability is and what they're kind of looking for.
Okay. And you work with them to
figure that out for sure.
Proper plans. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Oh, yeah, microphone's in the way. Like, there we go. It's over here. And so that wraps this show up.
Oh, we're not done.
We're not done. Let's go for another hour, because that's what you should be able to do. So we're going to wrap this one up here. For Cassandra, I'm Chris. Producer Max behind the camera, being quiet as a mouse, but making sure all this works. So thank you to him. Thank you to Central for, again, this beautiful location so we can do what we do. So for All I Ever Wanted podcast, we are out for today. Ciao.